The world awoke on Easter Monday to a moment of collective disbelief. From the grand boulevards of Buenos Aires to the cobbled streets of Rome, news spread like wildfire. Pope Francis, the 266th leader of the Roman Catholic Church, had passed away at the age of 88. The announcement came just hours after he made a poignant and symbolic appearance before tens of thousands of faithful in St. Peter's Square for the Easter Sunday Mass, his final public act as shepherd to over 1 billion Catholics. It was an ending no one expected. Frail but radiant, the pontiff had greeted pilgrims with a warmth that transcended his visible physical weakness. Seated in his wheelchair, he smiled, blessed infants, and waved to the crowds, his eyes twinkling with both tenderness and exhaustion. His final message, read by an aide as he listened in solemn reflection, was one of global concern. He denounced the violence in Gaza and Ukraine, condemning what he called the world's great thirst for death. He pleaded for compassion, diplomacy, and peace. These were to be his last public words, a plea for humanity spoken on Christianity's holiest day. At 7:35 a.m. local time on Easter Monday, Vatican officials confirmed that Pope Francis had died quietly in his residence. The world was stunned. Though the Pope had battled declining health for several months, including a serious bout of pneumonia in February, his death came with a heartbreaking suddenness, especially given his public appearance just the day before. In Rome, the sound of church bells mourning the fallen pontiff was soon joined by the quiet weeping of pilgrims and residents alike. BBC correspondent David Giglioni described seeing people drop to their knees in St. Peter's Square, overcome with emotion. Born Jorge Mario Bergoglio in Buenos Aires, Argentina, the future pope's early life was as unconventional as his papacy. The son of Italian immigrants fleeing Mussolini's fascism, he grew up in a working-class neighborhood. He held jobs as a chemical technician and even worked as a nightclub bouncer before hearing a deeper calling. In 1958, he joined the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, a Catholic order known for its intellectual rigor and dedication to social justice. From the beginning, his was a voice for the forgotten. As a Jesuit leader during Argentina's Dirty War, Bergoglio navigated the perils of authoritarian rule while working to protect the vulnerable. In 2013, he was elected as the first Jesuit pope, the first from the Americas, and the first non-European in more than 200 years to lead the church. He chose the name Francis after Saint Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of the poor, a name that would define his papacy. Pope Francis revolutionized the role of the pontiff, not through power, but through humility. He declined the luxurious papal palace, choosing instead to live in a modest suite in the Vatican guest house. He washed the feet of prisoners, embraced the disabled, and visited war zones and refugee camps. He was known to cold call ordinary people who wrote him letters. To many, he was not a distant religious figure. He was Papa Francesco, a spiritual father who walked with his flock, not ahead of it. His final Easter message reflected that same spirit. Though delivered by an aide, its meaning was unmistakably his. He called for the defense of religious freedom, the dignity of migrants, and the end of senseless wars. He asked the world to build bridges, not walls, and reminded leaders of all faiths that the cries of the poor and the wounded must never be ignored. Traditionally, the death of a pope triggers centuries-old rituals. The Camerlengo, or papal chamberlain, confirms the death by calling the pope's baptismal name 3 times. When there is no reply, he announces the passing to the world. The fisherman's ring, a symbol of the pope's spiritual authority, is then crushed. The embalming of the body typically follows within 24 hours, and the pope is placed on a catafalque inside St. Peter's Basilica for public mourning. Historically, popes are buried in 3 nested coffins, one of cypress, one of lead, and one of oak. But Pope Francis, ever the reformer, chose a different path. In keeping with his values, he requested a simpler funeral. There would be no ornate catafalque, no triple coffin. Instead, he will lie in a modest wooden casket, lined with zinc, with the lid removed during the visitation period, allowing mourners to see the man as he was. Unadorned, unpretentious, deeply human. Perhaps the most surprising deviation from tradition, Pope Francis will not be buried beneath St. Peter's Basilica, where most of his predecessors lie. Instead, he will be interred in the Basilica of St. Mary Major, a beloved Marian sanctuary in the heart of Rome. The decision underscores his lifelong devotion to the Virgin Mary and his desire to remain close to the people, even in death. Located outside Vatican walls, the basilica is more accessible to pilgrims, a final gesture of inclusion from a pope who constantly challenged the church to serve those on the peripheries. As news of his death spread, tributes poured in from all corners of the globe. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen praised him for inspiring millions far beyond the Catholic Church with his moral clarity and compassion. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, visibly emotional, said, "I had the privilege of enjoying his friendship. He asked us for the courage to change direction." U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, who had visited the Pope the day before his death, said, "My heart goes out to the millions who loved him, and Christian or not." Archbishop of York Stephen Cottrell described Francis as a holy man of God, but also very human, witty, lively, good to be with. From African bishops to Latin American leaders, from Orthodox patriarchs to secular heads of state, the chorus of grief and gratitude was global. Now begins a sacred process that has endured for centuries. After 9 days of mourning, the College of Cardinals will convene in Rome. They will enter the Sistine Chapel, sequestered from the world, and vote in secret until a new pope is chosen by a 2/3 majority. When the decision is made, white smoke will rise from the chapel's chimney, and the declaration, "Habemus Papam," we have a pope, will echo across St. Peter's Square. Who will carry forward the legacy of Francis, the Pope from the ends of the earth? That question looms large. But one thing is certain: whoever follows will inherit a papacy forever changed by a man who turned power into service, grandeur into humility, and doctrine into love in action. As the world says farewell to this remarkable leader, bells across Rome toll in mourning and in tribute. The pilgrims will come, the tears will fall. And yet, in the silence that follows, the voice of Pope Francis will still echo, urging us to see the forgotten, embrace the broken, and love without borders.